Krista here with you again today. And my days have kind of been running together a little bit. I thought today was Sunday when it's actually Monday. Luckily, right now I live with a house full of people, and I was quick to learn around 10 o'clock that it wasn't kind of a lazy, passive day again, and that I had to get my butt rolling and go to therapy, and everything just seemed kind of fast paced today for me. Um, I think for people that kind of are used to a more slower pace, like after having the COVID, and then you come back to life, or after you get done being sick or whatever it is, you come back and you have to get back to work. You have to like get back on the ball. And it just seems to that everybody is just going so fast. Um, and it's hard to keep, especially if you do suffer from states of CPTSD or mental disorders or whatever, or even are maybe are in recovery and are cleaning themselves up again, and you're ready to get back on the ball again, and you come back into the world per se, and you just like kind of notice that um maybe if you did take a break for a while and you come back to things, um to keep up in the world um can be daunting, as you step back into the arena of maybe facing a new job or a new challenge, maybe going back to school, um, escaping from narcissistic manipulative realities, or coming back out of that hole that you found yourself again, that you didn't even know that you were in again, until you started seeing signs around you that woke you up, um, as I'm finding a challenge that I'm in myself to come up, and as you stay in recovery and you might fall back into those holes, to find your way out again and wake up in quicker times than before, and where you are kind of learning where that hole is and how you fall into it, and what exactly that hole is for people in states of addiction. Um, or where you stand during that time, whether you know what the hole is or not. There can be so much learning involved, and it can be quite overwhelming, and sometimes even physically overwhelming when we hurt our bodies with these things. Maybe we were not careful to wear masks. Maybe other people were not careful to wear masks, that gave the corona to us, or an illness. Maybe we forgot to say no to that bottle, and then we find ourselves hanging with old friends or even family again, that are not good for us, and we find ourselves back in these states of taking pills or whatever it is, or cutting ourselves and harming ourselves again in whatever ways, when maybe somebody bothered us, somebody triggered us again into us not feeling good about ourselves. Whatever those triggers were, um, we can't blame, punish, or shame ourselves any longer, when we have more times to separate, maybe from the fast speed of the world, where we begin to give ourselves more moments of mindfulness, meditation, relaxation, or being nice to ourselves. Um, where we are hanging around less toxic people less, or toxic substances or places less, or where maybe we can't get away from it yet, but we're still in the midst of learning. It can be quite the challenge. Um, I know, especially in cases of addiction, where for a lot of us in our families, we've been conditioned to be enabled by these people, so we can depend on them for almost anything and everything. And when our thoughts get lost while being manipulated, um, or shunned or ignored, or whatever the manipulative vices were in your home growing up. Um, maybe we're still codependents, or maybe we're still addictive takers. Um, and where do we draw the line? When can we feel like we can pass go beyond the control and tactics that are thrown on us, when suddenly we no longer have a vehicle to drive, when suddenly our partner does not want to be with us anymore, when suddenly we lose that job, or we can't seem to get out of this hole no matter how deep it is. Maybe it's very deep. Maybe we were almost to the top of that hole and climbing out, when suddenly we were drawn back in by someone that we know. I'm still talking about narcissistic abuse again, and also addiction, uh, where a lot of times comes from the people that raised us, and the enabling dynamics that were played, that we can even play to ourselves, and how we're enabling ourselves in our minds that it's okay to do this or that, this one time or this one last time, and we're not going to do it again. Um, maybe it's just a fun ride without our license. Um, maybe one last pack of smokes. Maybe it's spending our last dimes on comics. Whatever it may be, you have to watch yourself. It's a balancing act, and it can be confusing and daunting, um, because, and frustrating too, when maybe people are telling us not to do this or that, and when are we ever going to learn, or, you know, treating us poorly, um, when in our minds, what's happening at the time is that uh, we're being conditioned to talk badly to ourselves, and we're conditioned to enable ourselves to what we are choosing for ourselves, or, for our kids, or for other people. I mean, you have to look at yourself. You have to stop and look at the people around you and become aware and awake, as to, are you stopping today? Are you stopping this week? And maybe making for me like a video to confront myself in areas that I'm working on. When it comes to level maybe leaving that toxic relationship that you were in with your family, friends, tribes, um, jobs, whatever it is. Um, I was kind of learning today a little bit about what this woman had on her videos, one of her videos, and it was about CPTSD and how, even though when we finally can escape and finally start living our lives more individually, that we can stop depending on others to get us through. When we start feeling more confident in ourselves, that we do have the power to stay in a recovery without dropping into that hole again, per se, for a length of time. Um, when you're feeling kind of back on the ball and you've got it together again, and you do have that job and you do have that new apartment, and everything, and maybe you finally got your kids back. And that has been a long sweep of time for you to come to that point where your kids are beginning to trust you again. um that's not just an overnight job. That can be a process that goes on for quite a while, as we learn these steps. But it was interesting today to learn about how when we do come away from these abusive relationships, and how they can be so addictive, like drugs, especially to the opposite sex and our mates. How we can be so just addicted to them like a drug. How we can finally stop when we start learning the pros and the cons of, when we make this list inside of our heads and we keep adding to it, like the pros, and when the cons start really outweighing the pros, just by like 3 to 5 lists or whatever. And um and you're learning, when we finally learn all we can, when we've learned all there is about codependency and these toxic relationships, and we're in these safe homes and these safe environments now, um, or where we've learned to dodge over that narcissist, and plan out our lives, and to where we can pull away from these people without fighting and not jumping in the mud and getting dirty with these pigs. Um, when we can finally cease and forgive yourself and the other in a different way, where we can finally stand on our own and not have to go back in there and try to defend yourself or get back at that other person, no matter how what bad that they did you with. Um, it can really, I mean, that can really take a lifetime, but the better we get at it, the better off we're going to be, because that's another big step. And but then we get these levels left where we're still tormented, when we're away from these people, what this CPTSD has done to us. Um, Complex post-traumatic stress disorder, you might find yourself going into that mental clinic and being termed with PTSD. But when it's CPTSD kind of in disguise, maybe you're agoraphobic now. Maybe you have a hard time leaving your house. It's kind of like coming out of these abusive lifetimes and patterns, and you're like a military person, and you're like a vet, and you come out of these wars, and you're still just shaken, and when you leave your house it's hard. You think you're in paranoia, maybe people are following you. You're just having panic attacks. You can't calm down, you pace your house, and you're trying not to go back into the habitual ways of coping, which are harmful. So as we gain better skills at better habits and ways of coping and learning, we're also stuck in these levels. Um, so, you got to um, heal that part of you through meditation, and maybe there's EMDR therapy, and maybe it's finding another good therapist or group. Maybe it's journal writing and different things, but if you wonder why it still feels like there's something wrong with you, there is, and it's called CPTSD. I'm going to be learning more about this in future videos. I would really like to, and better ways of healing ourselves from the CPTSD, like the after effects, because that's a big one for all of us. If you don't know what CPTSD is, um, it is something like that started usually in childhood for us in with abusive caretakers growing up, where they're screaming and yelling, usually purlining a narcissistic individual, at least one in the home. Um, and there's just a lot of torment and abuse going on. Read any of my, or listen to any of my videos on narcissistic abuse and what that entails, whether they're just maybe not as bad, but there were still a lot of dysfunction and toxicities growing up in your family, um, where it can be at levels so bad that um, like the emotional stuntedness that we learned, and we were kept from having levels, normal levels of anger, and learned to hold a lot of our emotions in. We're like, a lot of this stuff is still stuck inside of us, and we feel trapped, and there's no way out for um, where PTSD is. You can leave that there's like maybe a car accident that you're in, or just one trauma, but this is a trauma that you go through daily, and where it is daily done, and you can't get away from it, and prolonged periods of this. So that's what CPTSD is. I think maybe I've got about 20 minutes of video on here, and I wish you a happy, peaceful rest of your day.